Hello Internet, and welcome to Ramblings of a Madman. I'm Alex, and I'm joined by Sean and Stuart for a shallow and probably uninformed dive into the world of unexplained mysteries, conspiracy theories, and the supernatural. We're back. We've returned to talk about more crap.
Yeah.
We still haven't worked out what the goo wants.
No, I fear we'll never know.
We'll never
What
know.
does it want?
So, how are you today, Stuart?
I'm very well. I'm excited.
Good.
Why are you excited, Stuart?
Because it's my episode.
Oh my
Woo!
god,
It's
less
your
work for
second
me.
episode.
Oh, he did that little half-hour bit.
Yeah, it doesn't count.
Okay.
Although that was a really fun topic, actually.
Yeah, well, I've brought something completely different, so
good.
hopefully it'll still be good.
Awesome.
Right, so before we start today's topic, I know some of you out there are thinking, man, I've already subscribed to Ramblings of a Madman on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, and YouTube, but I really want another place to subscribe.
Tell me there must be another.
You're in luck, because
No way.
Amazon Music has finally launched their podcast platform, and we're on there.
Dun, dun, dun!
Just head to music.amazon.co.uk/podcasts and search for Ramblings of a Madman, or head to our Podbean website, ramblingsofamadman.podbean.com, and click on the link for Amazon Music. Also, while you're at it, you might as well give us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts. That'll be great. Right, let's get down to it then. Right, so what have you brought today for us, Stuart?
So I have bought the Flannan Lighthouse mystery.
Can we do that
Ooh.
one more time? Sorry. Like, Alex, what have you got today for us, Stuart? Was very flat.
I mean, that's my thing. I'm a very flat individual.
I'm basically a pancake.
I'm a starfish in human form.
You're the goo in human form, that's what you are.
He hasn't done an episode for ages, and you give him that? Come on.
This is what you should expect from me.
Stuart, what have you got for us today?
That's too much. That's too much.
We'll use that.
God,
Very,
let's just
very
get into the
heroic.
episode.
Okay, lighthouses.
Wait, are we leaving that in?
Yes.
Yeah, it is now.
Oh my god. Brilliant. Okay, fine. So, has anyone heard of the Flannan Islands Lighthouse mystery before?
I have.
You have heard of it, okay?
Unfortunately.
Sean, have you heard of it?
Flannan Islands.
Flannan Islands.
I can't pronounce that.
Fair enough. Alex, how much do you know about it?
This is the same one I'm thinking of. I listened to a podcast on it a few months ago.
Okay. So hopefully your short-term memory is terrible.
Yeah, it is, pretty much.
We'll rely on that.
It might be a different lighthouse, though. I'm not 100%.
It might be. Yeah, it might be.
Lighthouses are creepy.
Yeah, fair enough. So, the Flannan Islands Lighthouse is a lighthouse near the highest point of Eilean Moor, which is one of the Flannan Islands in the Outer Hebrides off the west coast of mainland Scotland. It's best known for the mysterious disappearance of its keepers in 1900.
Ooh. That's fucking miles off the coast.
Yeah, it is quite.
Well, it's miles off the coast, because like you got all like the Scottish Isles on the northwest, sorry, and then it's way off that as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's pretty much in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
So the mystery itself. The first record that something was abnormal on the Flannan Islands was on the 15th of December, 1900, when the steamer Arctur, on a passage from Philadelphia to Leith, noticed in its log that the light was not operational despite the poor weather conditions. When the ship docked in Leith on the 18th of December 1900, the sighting was passed on to the Northern Lighthouse Board. They then sent a relief vessel, the lighthouse tender Hesperus, but this was unable to sail from... Oh god, there are so many difficult Scottish names in this thing. But this was unable to sail from Brisklet, which is probably butchered, but never mind, from Lewis, as planned on the 20th of December due to adverse weather. It didn't reach the island until midday of the 26th of December, which was at least 11 days after the very first acknowledgement that something was wrong on the Flannan Island.
One day we're going to do an episode based in Asia somewhere, and the pronunciation is going to be awful.
It's pronunciation.
Exactly.
Every time.
Every time. So, the relief vessel, the Hesperus, was expecting to find personnel on arrival, namely 3 men. James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and William MacArthur, with a rotating fourth man who spent time on shore. However, on arrival, there were some unusual findings. The flagstaff itself had no flag. The significance of this is that the lighthouse would be observed by a telescope from Gallen Head on the Isle of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides. In the event of any emergency, the keepers were instructed to raise a flag, and then a rescue boat would immediately be dispatched to the Flannan Islands. The observer, Roderick Mackenzie, failed to notice anything amiss. Provision boxes were still left out. Basically, stores were yet to be restocked. And then finally, there wasn't a single soul to be found on the island. The captain of the Hesperus fired a flare into the sky and blew the ship's whistle to see if they could gather a response, but none was to be found of any use. The only response was an ominous silence and the occasional cry of a seabird. They then sent to the shore the relief keeper, Joseph Moore. He found the entrance gate to the compound and the main door both locked, the beds unmade, and the clock stopped with the date the 20th of December.
The clock stopped?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. So the clock had stopped. So just a recap of the dates, just as we're starting. So first noticed that the lighthouse wasn't active on the 15th. Then on the 20th of December, the Hesperus was supposed to sail, but couldn't because of adverse weather conditions, and eventually got there on the 26th. So something wrong on the 15th, clock stopped on the 20th.
Okay, so it was a clock that had the time and the date on it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And the only explanation is that time actually stopped.
Pretty much, yeah.
For that one island.
Time was no more.
That's what because I thought you said clocks. I was like, no way, they all stopped at the same time.
Wait, well, they did.
Wait, what?
Every clock had the 20th of December on it.
Oh, I did hear you right. Oh, that's mad. Okay.
The kitchen also revealed an overturned chair and the remains of a half-eaten meal, but there were no sign of the three colleagues. There was no sign of a fire in the grate being made for a week or so, despite the cold December weather.
It's always with these sea-related myths that it's just like, there should be people here, but they've all disappeared. It's the same with Mary Celeste, episode 1.
That's a throwback.
That's
a throwback.
Okay,
Go listen to that again. It's awful.
That was a great episode. I love that episode. Right, the clocks, were they all stopped at the same time, or is it just they were wound and they...
The date.
Not the same time?
I don't think so. We'll come back to it anyway.
Okay.
So, Joseph Moore, who is the relief keeper, the fourth guy of the personnel of the lighthouse, then returns to the landing stage with the news, and then went back up to the lighthouse, following giving the Hesperus this information, with the second mate and some other seamen from the... Well, that's just definitely going to get a joke out of that. But from other seamen from the Hesperus in order to man the lighthouse. Further searches revealed that the lamps had been cleaned and refilled. A set of oilskins was found, suggesting that one of the keepers had left the lighthouse without them. And there was no sign of any of the keepers, neither inside the lighthouse nor anywhere on the island. At this point, the Hesperus needed to make contact with the lighthouse board, so they left men on the lighthouse and returned to Lewis. They sent a telegram on the 26th of December 1900, as quoted. A dreadful incident has happened at the Flannans. The three keepers, Ducat, Marshall, and the Occasional, have disappeared from the island. The clocks were stopped, and the other signs indicated that the accident must have happened about a week ago. Poor fellows, they must have been blown over the cliffs or drowned trying to secure a crane or something like that. Night coming on, we could not wait to make something of as to their fate. I have left Moore, MacDonald, Boymaster, and 2 seamen on the island to keep the light burning until you make other arrangements. Will not return to Oban until I hear from you. I have repeated this wire to Muirhead in case you are not at home. I will remain at the telegraph office tonight until it closes, if you wish to wire me.
I'm sorry, Boymaster.
Boymaster, I know.
I didn't want to interrupt you with my laughter, but also it's very apt because boys are like floating on the ocean as well. Like buoy master.
They're a marker, aren't they? They're a warning marker, aren't they?
They are.
Okay. So he then left 3 more people there to keep the lighthouse going.
Yeah, it shifts, isn't it? 3 people go, and then they replace the 3 people who have been on there for months.
Yeah, well, the way that this one worked was that 3 people did 3-week stints and then had 3 weeks off, I believe.
Yeah, so they rotated.
Yeah, so basically you were on it for quite a long time and then you had a few weeks off.
Yeah, it's like what you do if you work on an oil rig nowadays.
Yeah.
Take a helicopter out there and work like 2 weeks and then have 2 weeks off.
Okay, so just with the clocks, because I'm just getting my head
stuck
around
on
it.
these clocks.
So it's 1900, so the clocks wouldn't just last forever because they wouldn't have had batteries in, for example.
Yeah, I'm assuming they were wind-up clocks.
They were wind up. They would have wound them every single day or whatever to keep them all going. It wouldn't have been anything fancy, right? Because they were in the middle of nowhere.
I presume.
Yeah, so the intention is that there's been no one there to wind them.
Yeah, so my initial thing, I was like, wait, what? Like, because obviously thinking of a digital clock, like, why would they all be stopped on the same day? Did the
Power cut.
Did someone take power cut? Did someone take the batteries out? So it's obviously a wind-up clock.
When were batteries invented?
I love these random questions that literally have no bearing on the podcast whatsoever.
Well, no, it does, actually. Because if they had
we
batteries,
learn
it
things
changes
on this
everything.
show. All right, history of the battery on Wikipedia. This is a very long article.
Well, actually, if you remember, the first recorded instances of batteries were discussed in episode 4 with the pyramids and the coffins.
Oh yeah, batteries were invented at this point, way before. And they were very big. They were like massive stone obelisks, though.
Yeah, I'm going off wind-up clocks.
Wait, what?
I'm going off them being wind-up clocks. What was hard to understand about that?
Okay. Anyway, so moving swiftly on. So obviously the people on the Hesperus have already made their conclusions in their telegram. So
Solved.
Well, sort of, yeah. So they've made the assumption that an accident has happened, and they made the assumption that they've been blown over the cliffs or drowned trying to secure a crane or something like that. Literally, to paraphrase.
Yes. They've been lost to sea forever, and we're not even going to bother look for them.
Yep. Podcast over. It was the sea all along.
The one enemy of all mankind, the sea.
It's like a Scooby-Doo episode. You pull the mask off and it's just the sea underneath it.
And then they all drown.
Okay, so what happened next? So on the 29th of December 1900, Robert Muirhead, a Northern Lighthouse Board superintendent, arrived to conduct the official investigation into the incident. Muirhead had originally recruited all 3 of the missing men and knew them personally. He examined the clothing left behind in the lighthouse and concluded that James Ducat and Thomas Marshall had gone down to the Western Landing stage, and that Donald MacArthur, also known as the Occasional from the telegram, had left the lighthouse during heavy rain in his shirt sleeves. He noted that whoever left the lighthouse last and unattended was in breach of the Northern Lighthouse Board rules. He also noted that some of the damage to the West Landing was difficult to believe unless actually seen. And a further quote, "From evidence which I was able to produce, I was satisfied that the men had been on duty up till dinner time on Saturday the 15th of December, that they had gone down to secure a box in which the mooring ropes, landing ropes, etc. were kept, and which was secured in a crevice in the rock about 110 feet, or 34 metres, above sea level, and that an extra large sea had rushed up the face of the rock, had gone above them, and coming down with immense force, had swept them all completely away." He proposed this as the official outcome of the investigation.
So what you said about the damage on the east wing?
On the West Landing.
West Landing.
I'll come on to that in a second, actually.
Okay.
So that is basically the whole story. So there's the official conclusion and there's the chain of events.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of this is all different theories over why things might be true, why might not be
So
true.
From what I remember, there was something about the coats, wasn't there? Didn't they leave coats behind?
Yeah, so the oil skins. So when he examined all the clothing left behind, he assumed that James Ducat and Thomas Marshall had gone down to the Western Landing stage, and that Donald MacArthur had left the lighthouse during heavy rain in his shirt sleeves, leaving behind his oilskin.
Yeah, right. That's what you mean by oilskin. I was thinking like a
water skin.
Yeah, like you'd hold oil in for the lamp or whatever. But okay.
Okay, so to be clear, what did they? You said they went to go down to get a chest that was in the mooring area.
Yes.
What exactly did you mean by that? Sorry.
So they would have had like storage stuff like stashed basically to keep space to like an essential.
Right. Okay. So they must need it for supplies or something.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that doesn't matter, but it kind of does in my head to know why they left the lighthouse as a 3-man.
Well, the assumption is that it's something important because the third guy left without even putting his coat on.
Yeah, exactly.
In
So
the
they
storm.
must. Right. Okay. We need to know more of the story. So the assumption is that wherever this crate was too close to the coast of the island.
Yes.
And they got dragged by the backwash of the sea, like the big wave.
So yes. So basically, the first theory is that the sea is responsible, like Alex said. So whilst the Hesperus was travelling to communicate its telegram back to the Northern Lighthouse Board, the men who were remaining on Eilean Moor scoured every corner of the island for clues as to the fate of the keepers. They found that everything was intact at the east landing, but the west landing provided considerable evidence of damage caused by recent storms. A box at 33 metres or 108 foot above sea level had been broken and its contents strewn about. Iron railings were bent over, and the iron railway by the path was wrenched out of its concrete, and a rock weighing more than 1 ton had been displaced. Now, the importance of that is the fact that there was a track running across the island to make transportation between the east and west landings easier.
Okay. So the link that you sent on
It's
the
just a
map,
map.
you can actually no, you can change it to photo, and it actually has a really nice real life
Yes.
picture.
Yeah. Admittedly, I think of now because that's why the helipad's there, but
Well, yeah, but you can still see the
you can see the track. You can
so,
see the track. Yeah.
that's quite interesting. So when you beg your pardon, when you say the west landing, where exactly is that?
I'm assuming it's on the west side.
On the west side where the boats would land. Okay, hang on.
Yeah, it would be like the west coast of the island, right? There'd be like a pier sort of area.
There isn't, like, well, to me at least.
Well, maybe not now.
Oh, yeah, there is. That's really cool. It's built into the cliff face.
Yes, it is built into the cliff face.
Okay. So the damage was done to that.
At 110 foot high, sorry.
That's quite a big cliff, yeah. Okay.
So on top of the cliff, at more than 60 metres above sea level, turf had been ripped away as far as 10 metres from the cliff edge. So that's a fairly considerable storm to literally rip the grass away from it.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm getting excited now. This is interesting.
So Alex will like this bit. He's going to fucking hate
Why?
me for this bit. Review of the geography of the islands also supports the potential of the sea. Just to wind up. Review of the geography of the islands also supports the potential of the sea being the culprit. So the coastline of Eilean Moor is deeply indented with narrow gullies called geos. The west landing, which is situated in such a geo, terminates in a cave. In high seas or storms, water would rush into the cave and then explode back out again with considerable force. It's thought possible that MacArthur may have seen a series of large waves approaching the island and, knowing the likely danger to his colleagues, ran down to warn them, only to be washed away as well in the violent swell. So MacArthur is the guy who goes out without his coat on.
Yes, okay. Yeah,
So
I can see how that would happen.
ensues.
So,
yeah.
It's not a massive island, though, as well, is it?
Well, I mean, it's hard to tell because obviously the lighthouse is pretty big.
Okay. Oh,
And then it's not.
It would take a considerable amount of time to run that way.
True, but you've got no other way of warning them except to fire a flare, I suppose, which I hadn't thought of. Maybe he should have fired a flare.
He wasn't a smart man.
No. So one of the reasons why the theory about them charging out might be important is that Marshall had previously been fined 5 shillings when his equipment was washed away during a huge gale. It's possible, and maybe likely, that in order to seek to avoid a further fine, that he and Ducat tried to secure their equipment during a storm and were swept away as a result. The fate of MacArthur, although he was required to stay behind to man the lighthouse, can be presumed that it was the same. He probably tried to warn his colleagues or even help his colleagues and could have been swept away too.
Okay.
Yeah, so they were more willing to put themselves in danger because they'd already gotten in trouble about losing equipment.
Yeah.
And they were hardy sea folk, so they were like, yeah, fuck the storm.
Sure.
Well, or were they? So The good thing about the sea being the theory is that it has advantages of explaining the set of oilskins remaining indoors, MacArthur's coat remaining on its peg, but it doesn't explain why the door was closed and the gate was closed. Because why would you run out and shut the door behind you if you're in that much of an emergency?
Wind.
I think looking at the layout of it, though, the wind would have ripped the door open.
Maybe you just really want to close the door. Force of habit.
Maybe. Maybe. So the assumption...
The fact that he forgot his coat, I agree, it does bode that he would have been to too much of a rush to close the door. If he wasn't thinking about his own safety and his own welfare. Because I can imagine a storm that far out and that north would be horrible.
Yeah, I think that's...
My hair would get wet, and I don't even have hair.
You grow hair, and then it would get wet.
Okay, the other thing that you said about the geography, it was definitely possible that a storm could have caused the damage.
Well, so that's one of the counter arguments. So, in terms of so things that go slightly against this theory.
Yeah, go on.
There were no storms reported in the adjoining areas on the 12th, 13th, or the 14th of December. Storms were only reported from the 17th of December onwards, which are the storms that prevented the Hesperus from leaving. There's no evidence of any weather on the Isle of Lewis on those dates, unless the weather in the Flannans was extremely localised.
Okay.
The question then, what caused the severe and ominous damage at the West Landings if it wasn't a severe localised storm? One of the things that helps to look at this is a Lighthouse logbook. So the Lighthouse logbook indicated unusual and extreme weather conditions. The entry for the 12th of December, written by Second Assistant Thomas Marshall, reported severe wind, the likes of which they had never seen before. He wrote that the tough Third Assistant, Donald MacArthur, had been crying, and the log for the 13th recorded continuing gale force winds, and that all three men had been praying for the storm to stop. A quote from it: December the 12th, gale north by northwest, sea lashed to fury, stormbound 9 p.m. Never seen such a storm. Everything everything ship shape. Ducat irritable. 12 p.m. Storm still raging. Wind steady. Stormbound. Cannot go out. Ship passed. Sounding foghorn. Could see light of cabins. Ducat was quiet. MacArthur was crying. December 13. Storm continued through the night. Wind shifted west by north. Ducat quiet. MacArthur praying. 12 noon. Grey daylight. Me, Ducat, and MacArthur prayed. December 15. 1 p.m. Storm ended. Sea calm. God is over all.
That's the line. The end there.
That gave me goosebumps then. That actually gives me goosebumps. I didn't like that.
God is over all.
God is overall as in...
It's up for interpretation, isn't it?
Oh, okay.
It's like all
as
the time
in
you speak.
spelt over all or one word?
2 words.
Okay, so he wasn't wearing overalls.
No, he left them in the lighthouse.
Ah, with his oilskin. Of course, okay. God is my overalls.
God stole my overalls.
You said it was open to interpretation, no? Okay, so beg your pardon, is that how they worked out the 15th was the last time they were active?
The 15th was the date that the lighthouse was seen not active.
Right, okay.
So a passing ship went by, realised where they were, and realised that the lighthouse should be lit up, but isn't.
Okay. That's... nah.
I know you're probably going to get to this, I don't want to spoil things too much, but those messages really read to me of people going stir crazy.
Yeah. But they were praying, they were crying, they were that desperate. And the storm went from the 12th to the 15th.
Well, according to the logbook, yeah. But according to all storm reports and weather reports, there was no storm.
Oh, man.
Exactly. So it's
not
like,
until the 17th.
It's like people going crazy. And
they are quite far out, right? I'm not... For the first time this episode, I must announce
Are you not a meteorologist? Is that what you're about to say?
I'm so glad you said that, because I was going to say
you were going to say a weatherman.
Meteorologist. Weatherologist. No, meteorologist. I am...
Just get on with it.
Is it impossible? Is it impossible? Jesus Christ! Is it completely impossible for it to be localized to this area? Because if you zoom out, it is quite far away from the shore, from Lewis. And you said it was there you go, 21 miles away. That is quite far. No, but you would... No, there's no way in hell the storm was localized.
Okay, so for that argument, in 2013, author and historian Keith McCloskey conducted his own research into the incident with the support of a meteorologist from the University of Highlands.
I think you mean weather person.
With a weather person from the University of Highlands and the islands on Lewis. So McCloskey reanalyzed the weather patterns for the Flannan Islands around the time of the 15th of December 1900. He discovered that although the weather appears to have indeed been rough, it wouldn't have been anything that 3 seasoned lightkeepers hadn't been through before. Wind speed was estimated to have peaked at roughly 60 miles an hour, and any waves generated by such a storm would barely have made it above 30 foot.
60 miles per hour is quite high, isn't it? But it's not gale force, if I'm correct.
No, I'm not sure about that. The interesting thing about that is that if you make the assumption that this meteorologist, weather person, is correct about the waves being at 30 foot, it doesn't really explain why...
The damage.
Yeah, it doesn't really explain the damage. And it's also at odds with the fact that the men would have been at well over 100 feet when they were supposedly taken. The largest freak wave ever recorded was 95 foot high. So if it was a freak wave, it would have to have been the largest wave ever known.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So it seems pretty unlikely that a wave would have taken them.
Now, you said that they were seasoned. Do we know how long they'd been working the lighthouse?
Good question.
Was it their first shift? Do we know?
No, it wasn't.
I imagine the third guy, who they didn't even name in the letter, was he like the new guy? Because he was the one who ran out without his coat, right? So it makes sense that...
No, that was MacArthur.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Stu.
So MacArthur was the guy that ran out in his shirt sleeves.
Okay, never mind.
Okay, just as a side thing, you said the maximum recorded speed of the wind was 60 miles per hour?
Calculated.
Yes, calculated, yeah.
So 39 to 54 miles per hour is a gale. So it's not unheard of that there could have been gale force winds, if that makes
Fair
sense.
point, yeah.
Yeah, so 39 to 54 is classed as a gale. So then anything above that must be like storm and stuff. So I don't know, because is a gale... It's classed as a strong wind here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think when you think of a gale, I don't think you think of railway tracks being uplifted and grass being ripped off from the soil.
No. And what was the name, the term for it when it's like where the water rushes into it?
It was called a geo.
A geo, right. Okay, so you can kind of see on the map that I'm looking at, it definitely could happen. You know, if something came out that way, the backrush of that. But, like, it doesn't explain... Like, you're saying, like, the highest freak wave ever recorded was 90, and it was like this cliff was 100 foot from the sea level.
Yeah.
Then the geo, so the force of the water generated from the geo, that, in my head, could make it more likely that it could have, like, focused a lot of the energy to cause more damage and get the wave higher.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it would have deflected it.
I think the theory behind the geo is that it's a fixed space. So if you then suddenly fill the space, the volume is...
It gets squished.
Of free space is reduced, and because pressure and volume are inversely proportional, you drive the pressure really high. So as you drastically reduce the volume and you overfill the volume, the pressure goes astronomical. So the backwash then fires out of it as the tide goes in, and fills the cave up with water. The pressure created is so significant that arguably it could throw water hundreds of foot in the air.
Yeah, but for it to peel back turf for up to 10 foot, or like was the turf decimated or literally peeled back?
Decimated.
I mean, it was ripped up from the soil.
Right, okay.
So it was basically like reflected back on itself.
I mean, wave action is really strong.
Yeah, I'm not doubting that. The sea is arguably one of the scariest part of nature. You scary.
Damn, nature, you
Damn,
scary.
nature. But I'm not disputing that. I'm just trying to work out, especially looking at the map. Like, as if you... I don't know. It's really hard for me to say.
One of the things that's interesting about the tracking the effects of the weather is that in a slightly bizarre twist, the captain's log, the logbook, is not a diary or like a captain's log. It's literally a track of weather. So it's weird that suddenly comments have been made about the personnel and the personnel's views. It literally, historically, the trace of all the entries in the book, it literally starts on December the 12th, where he starts to comment about the other sailors. Not the other sailors, sorry, the other Lighthouse crew.
Yeah.
Oh, so before that, it's literally just only weather.
Before, yeah. So for example, December the 12th, gale north by northwest, sea lash to fury, storm around 9 p.m. That would be a classic example. But the addendum to it is never seen such a storm. Everything ship shape to cap irritable.
Mm-hmm.
So these entries are very unusual.
They're being annotated.
Yeah.
And they weren't added later.
Well,
like,
so one of the things
conspiracy.
that I couldn't find anything about was whether or not that could have been a fabrication.
Have you seen like a picture of the logbook, or are you just reading the transcript?
Reading a transcript.
Okay. Because I was going to say, like,
we're going to do
handwriting
examination now.
It's happened before.
It's happened quite a lot, actually.
Jack the Ripper episode.
And hang on, Tannum should. It comes up more than you expect it to come up.
Yeah. Honestly, I didn't see anything about it. The idea of it being fabricated was something that I thought of as I was making the entries.
But I feel like it's possible, but there's no arguments for it. Like, why would anyone do it?
Well, it could be a cover-up.
Okay.
So
it's big Lighthouse.
I'll skip slightly. So one of the things that is interesting was the way that they came to the conclusion about the wave. So this leads on to one of the other theories, which was about whether or not this could have been murder. So Alex, obviously, knowing the story before, has already said about people going insane. So the reason why murder is an interesting theory is obviously it's an age well before social media and smartphones. Working on a rock in the year 1900 meant complete and utter isolation from all communication with the world.
Yeah, definitely.
The comparison nowadays for something trying to get a reference point would be astronauts who travel through the isolation of space, who are, even when they're able to communicate with others on the ground, still have like months and months of training and constant psychological analysis, because isolation is so decimating to people's mental health and like mental stability.
Mm-hmm.
One of the theories is that could MacArthur, who had worked almost consistently without a break for 2.5 months leading up to the 15th of December, had finally snapped. And the entries in the logbook reflect that.
I mean, that's definitely possible, but doesn't explain the damage.
Fair point.
Because he's not going to do that.
I mean, he might have been angry.
So he
hulked out.
He took a shovel and ripped off all that turf.
He's like, I'll show you.
Did any of the damage look like it could have been done, even remotely, by one single human?
Well, maybe not a human, no.
Don't be like that.
An angry goat.
Oh. You haven't seen those Scottish goats.
A goat swims across to this island and then just goes, I'll show you, and eats a very specific section of grass.
I mean, you get up that cliff fine. Have you seen those things?
Yeah,
that is true, yeah.
Could he have swam, though?
Well, that's, yeah.
I wouldn't put it past them. Sneaky, those goats.
Sneaky, those goats. I suppose things that go for and against for the idea of murder So certainly being isolated might mean that your tolerance of other people might become very, very thin. People might be doing things to upset you. People might be,
Run out of whiskey.
Run out of whiskey, yep. So having been cooped up on what must have felt at times literally like the edge of the world, it's not unreasonable to think that the circumstances were ripe for a breakdown to happen. One of the theories is perhaps if the other two men had left the building to undertake some sort of routine operation, MacArthur's final moment of isolation, he'd simply lost his mind and wandered coatless into the storm, bludgeoning his companions to death before throwing himself into the water below.
Yeah, in terms of I was thinking, blood spatters, but 1900s forensics wouldn't have been a thing. And also, if there was a storm, or even if there was just rain, which there would have been, it would just blown it all away.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that's it's a big con. It's that there's no evidence of any murder. No blood was found at the scene, although a forensic investigation wasn't undertaken. The Northern Lighthouse Board literally sent one man to come to the conclusion of this. No follow-up investigation was done. No bodies were found, but then you probably wouldn't expect there to be because no one's going to be searching it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here's a second question, which is kind of in relation to this, but just in general, I wanted to kind of know. Did anything happen to the 3 guys that they left there after?
In terms of adverse incidents?
Yeah, so when they turned up, they investigated a little bit. They left 3 guys behind to keep the lighthouse going.
No.
Nothing happened to them. They didn't find anything out of ordinary. Okay.
There's not an ongoing curse.
Well, that's what I was going for.
Well, I can jump to theory 2 if you want.
Go for it.
In fact, before I do that, I'll just give you a comparative point on the idea of murder. So, on Thursday, the 18th of August, 1960, 18-year-old David Cullen and his father took a day trip to visit Ross Island off the southwest coast of Scotland. On the island stood a lighthouse that had been built in 1843. David and his father set off from the local sailing club and arrived at the island shortly before lunch. As a courtesy, David thought it right that they should inform the lighthouse keepers that they were there. After knocking on the door, David received no response, except from a rather over-enthusiastic dog that he assumed must have belonged to one of the keepers. As the day wore on, the keepers had still not returned, the only sign of life being the ominous ringing of an unanswered telephone coming from inside the lighthouse. Eventually, David's father plucked up the courage to enter the building, and inside he found lighthouse keeper Hugh Clark dead, with fellow keeper Robert Dixon nowhere to be seen. After an extensive manhunt, the 24-year-old Dixon was eventually apprehended and brought to trial for the murder of Hugh Clark. Dixon's execution was set for the 21st of December 1960. However, 5 days prior to the fateful day, Dixon was reprieved on account of what the judge believed to be unstable mental condition at the time of the crime. Robert Dixon's apparent moment of psychopathy was thought to have been stimulated in no small part by the stress of working in such close proximity with others in a state of such intense isolation. So it sounds like it's happened again.
Yep.
On the same place as well?
No, it's a different lighthouse. Yeah. But the idea is, the principle is, it's happened again.
Yeah, I have no doubt that this could happen. It just doesn't explain anything for me.
Yeah, it's missing out important details.
It doesn't explain, it explains the logbook because, yes, he might have lied about it and he maybe put more emphasis into a lot of the detail to kind of cover it up, but in fact made it look even more suspicious. Does that make sense? In his panic, he might have written all that and then whatever. But then where did he go?
He killed himself.
Did he kill himself?
Well, it would be easy to kill yourself there. You just throw yourself into the water.
I agree, but why?
But why?
I don't know. It just doesn't.
Because crazy people be crazy.
Yeah.
Right. The damage done to the West Landing and the damage done to the turf and the damage done to the railroad tracks. Is it just coincidence in that story?
Well, so another theory is one of spirits. So obviously, a lot of people will take this with a bit of salt. Yes, whiskey. The whiskey was the culprit.
They slipped on the whiskey.
So I'll just send you boys a picture. So it's another good picture, actually. Sorry, I probably should have sent you that at the start. This is just a blog about other bits and bobs. But there's a good picture of it. But the third picture down is what I'm about to talk about.
Yeah, the chapel.
The chapel, yeah. So on the island, lies an old stone chapel built by Irish bishop St. Flannan in the 6th century. The island takes its name from this Irish missionary. Mockingly, though, many referred to the church as the Dog's Kennel due to its small stature and outdated appearance versus the adjacent lighthouse.
Yeah, I would not call that a church.
No?
I'd
Fair
call it a stone igloo.
Stone igloo.
A stigloo, if you will.
So, in terms of things that relate to the mockery. So, during the lighthouse being built, the foreman, known as Mr. Dias, died suddenly. In 1904, 4 years after the disappearance of the men, newly installed lighthouse keeper John McLaughlin was cleaning the glass casing of the lighthouse when he slipped and fell to his death.
On the whiskey.
On whiskey. Counting the foreman who died shortly before the lighthouse opened, 5 people died on the island in less than 5 years since the lighthouse was constructed. And no other lighthouse in the UK has been beset by such tragedy.
Yeah, well, their safety standards were just terrible.
It's just health and safety gone
It
mad,
is, yeah.
It's just health and safety gone mad.
So one of the theories is called the theory of the Phantom of the Hunters. So the 7 islands that make up, the 7 islands are also known as the 7 Hunters. So Eliam Moore, which I've probably butchered the pronunciation of hundreds of times
That's
now.
fine.
Was one of the 7 Hunters, right? So one of the theories is that the peacefully uninhabited island was disturbed to build the lighthouse. So was there a spirit there claiming revenge for the disturbance of this peace? In the memoirs written by Joseph Moore many years later, it's clear that the event had affected him profoundly. Thinking back to that chilly December day in 1900 that he first came upon the empty lighthouse, he writes of a mysterious event of the night before. That night he hadn't been sleeping well, and for some reason had been drawn to the window. Looking out, he thought he saw the boathouse on fire, but when he investigated further, he found it just to be a figment of his imagination. He knew instantly that it was a portent for something awful. Detailing again the event, which he described as very strange indeed, he believed us all to be cursed in some way. So obviously that's written in retrospect of the whole events. So you wonder whether or not he's now thinking about the fact that he's cursed.
Yeah, it's very much influenced.
Yeah. And that's probably the biggest con of that. Obviously, whether or not you believe in ghosts, spirits,
yeah, because it could just be a cash grab or whatever.
Yeah.
It could just be him like jumping on the bandwagon and being like, "Oh, well, I had this dream."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interestingly, following 1904, nobody else died, and it was automated in 1971, and there were no further reports documented from any of the lighthouse keepers. And it's now manned it by itself. It mans itself.
Lighthouse.
Robo Lighthouse, yeah. So basically, 5 people died in 4 years, and then no one died ever again.
Yeah. I mean, if I was a spirit that lived on my own island, one, I'd be pretty rich because I own my own island. So screw all the other spirits there.
Lord Spirit,
the third. I would be annoyed if people came and built basically a giant light that was on all the time. Like it would be, be in my eyes, my spirit ghost eyes. It would shine through me to make myself seem less scary to passers-by. I'd be annoyed. It's not on.
And there you go. So it must be true, right?
So there's complete evidence there.
There you go.
And we're done.
Yeah.
Cut to outro.
So they're the main theories, really. So it's either the sea, madness, spirits. I've got 4th theory as UFO/alien/giant squid.
Perfect.
In the comment, this is obviously the answer written underneath it. With no other document.
A giant squid would explain the damage.
It would.
But where are sucker marks?
Well, the sucker marks are what pulled the turf off.
Yeah. And also, the giant squid is clever. It wouldn't leave obvious sucker marks.
It wipes up its own fingerprints afterwards. It's sucker prints.
Exactly. That's why we've never found it.
Perfect.
That's why we've forgotten about it after all these episodes.
Yeah. I told you there'd be a throwback.
Back.
I like it.
So things that support the UFO. No, I haven't got anything. I'm just joking.
I was like, wait, fuck off.
There was a crop
finally-
circle right next to the
There was a crop
lighthouse.
circle. Yes, that's exactly it. There was a crop circle that made by Alex as a spirit.
See?
They have their own small field of corn.
And then to finish, somewhat bizarrely while searching this, apparently Genesis made a song about this island, as you do, and it's awful.
Okay.
Absolutely, like if you listen to it, it's just awful.
Well, calling out Genesis. They're never going to be a guest on the show.
This particular song,
Oh,
this
it's really
particular
bad.
song was awful.
The lyrics are fucking god awful.
They're awful. So those are the theories. So obviously there's bits missing from both, or all of them, I suppose, and things that I couldn't find an explanation for. The bit that you would keep coming back to, Sean, is the whole damage to the railway line. And I don't know how that would have happened other than
So yeah,
weather.
to kind of clarify, like the West Landing bit, obviously when it comes to the damage on the West Landing, it's difficult to kind of, for me, to envision the damage that was actually caused, but it could be attributed to a massive wave, especially because of that geo area with the the potential for the force of the water. But like, it just comes back to the railroad. Like, if there was a storm strong enough to take out the railroad, why didn't it damage anything else? And especially, why didn't it damage that little chapel?
I mean, I don't think the chapel is that close to the edge.
So forget the sea. I'm talking wind.
Got you. Well, I can only assume that the chapel has been there, seeing as it's been built there since the 6th century, or reportedly anyway, that maybe it's in a little gully of some kind, or
Yeah,
it's
like a
got loads of
windbreak
holes
sort
in
of
it,
thing, yeah.
and it's in, and it's there.
It does look a bit worse for wear, but like,
Yeah,
it's protected by the spirits. There you go.
I mean, that's literally the answer.
It is very small as well, so it would be
Yeah.
less likely to be. Like, tall things get damaged by wind, right? If things are short, they don't usually.
Yeah, it makes sense. So
Erosion.
Erosion.
right, go on. Tell us about what you think about the railroad.
I mean, I wasn't offering anything, but okay. The main thing for me would be the problem with all of the theories is that there are pieces missing from all of them. The sea theory has the whole something suddenly happened. The guy that should have stayed behind decided to go and try and help them, only to die as well. It also explains the damage to the the local structure, in the sense that it would have to be a severe storm.
Mhm.
The cons and stuff about it are a bit odd, in the sense, unless there's like a significant overlap between them, is the fact that there were no storms reported. So there were no storms on the 12th, 13th, or 14th, and the only storm that happened was on the 17th, which is what stopped the relief boat going. So any storm that would have happened would have to have been completely isolated to that island and have no visible evidence of any other storms for anybody else.
That's the thing, because I'm thinking like, oh, what if there was a localized storm? But they, you said from the Isle of Lewis, they used to keep an eye on it through telescopes and stuff.
Yeah, so one of the potential issues with the whole checking thing is that the date of the 15th was the date that the passing ship didn't see the light. In terms of the last light that was seen by the island of Lewis looking out for it,
Mhm.
is before then, because there was when fog happened, you literally couldn't see the island. So you wouldn't. So you were relying on them to be able to see a flag, not a working lighthouse. So that's the thing. So they were looking for the flag, but they weren't able to see the flag, and they weren't able to see the flag for at least a few days beforehand. So it doesn't fit with that either.
In a fog, why would you be able to see a flag better than the lighthouse?
Well, I think the idea was that the lighthouse should always be working. So provided that you can see it, you don't have any worries about the lighthouse itself, but that doesn't reflect that there could be like a medical emergency. So there's no way of you being able to influence the light, because the light is just on or off.
So the flag was only put up in emergencies.
Yeah.
Got you. Right. Would they have checked every day?
Yeah, so there was an
Right.
observer that was whose job it was to check the
Yeah,
check
yeah,
the
yeah. So
flags.
my point being is that's a cushy little job that.
I mean, it's pretty
Once a
boring.
day, I will take. Well, I'm presuming more than once a day. If it was actually just his job, he would check a couple of times a day, I guess.
My
Yeah.
job is to
Um,
glance down this
anyway,
telescope and clean the
anyway, that's not
telescope.
that's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is, in my head, I've got this idea of this little localized storm, right? Like, why does it always rain on me? There's a big, rain cloud right above. It's just like a sphere of dread and wind, and then it's stereotypical Scottish weather everywhere else, just like a bit of overcast and rain and stuff, right? And then surely, if the guy watching the island, he would be able to see a localized storm. Does that make any sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Like he'd be able to see, because if you can look at the sky, you can see clouds, you can see if a storm's coming, you can feel it. If they live there, I mean, Lewis itself is an island off the coast of Scotland, so they potentially would have lived there their entire lives. They know what weather's like. They would have been able to notice if there was a storm on the Flannel Islands.
You could physically see the waves hitting the cliffs and stuff.
Exactly, yeah. So even if there was no rain or wind, presumably there would be wind because that would help cause the waves, right?
Yeah,
But
I mean, the counter argument to what you're saying is that it's the middle of December, it's dark. The log says 9 p.m., never seen such a storm. So it's already dark, it's probably cloudy and raining, and it might be foggy. Like, I don't think that you can use visibility as a way.
I can, because it was the 12th to the 15th. So I agree with what you're saying. On the night that they recorded bad weather at 9 o'clock, fair enough, dark. What about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, daytime the next day, when there would have been sunlight? Don't get me wrong, if it's bad enough weather, and generally during the winter the sky is darker, I think, but you'd still have daylight.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree.
Depends how often they check it, I guess.
Yeah, and
Well,
I
they
suppose
check
what
every
time
day.
they check it.
Yeah.
They check
Check it out,
minimum
yeah.
every day. If there was a medical emergency flag, 4 medical emergencies, and the guy watching, I presume he'd check more than once a day during the daytime, because things can still happen during the day. It makes sense that he would check the lighthouse only on the hours where it would make sense that it would be on. But you can have lighthouses on during the day in times of storms and fog and freak weather anyway. That's the
Yeah.
point. So my point being, I don't think there was a storm.
Okay, so let me give you a point which we haven't mentioned yet, or rather reiterating a point that we haven't looked at it from this angle. So there were no storms reported on the 12th, 13th, or 14th, but there were storms reported on the 17th. Now, the lighthouse was reportedly not working on the 15th, but there was definitely a storm on the 17th, and nobody made it to the island until the 26th. How do we know that the storm that damaged the railways didn't happen way, way after this?
That's what I've been thinking as well.
Okay.
Although I've
Okay,
got some
yeah.
inside info, so I'm trying not to jump on everyone's theories too much.
I mean,
Okay.
I actually don't know if I've got an answer to that question that I just asked.
Well, so I'll say
before you say it,
Okay.
because I'd like to hear what you have if Stuart doesn't have that. I can't argue with that, because the idea that there could have been damage before as well.
Yeah.
Like when the last time they visited, was it? Hang on, it was the 9th, 7th of December. Robert Muirhead, superintendent he investigated the lighthouse just to visit and shook hands with all of them. Oh, and we also, Alex, you also asked for if they were experienced. It says they were 3 experienced keepers.
Yeah.
Doesn't say how experienced, but they were experienced.
They were also picked by Robert Muirhead, the guy that literally did the investigation. They were handpicked.
Yeah. Anyway, maybe it does lean more towards like murder or madness then.
One of the things that supports the madness theory as well is I said at the very beginning. So the entrance gate to the compound and the main door were closed. The beds were unmade. The kitchen showed an overturned chair and there was a half-eaten meal. So did something happen during mealtime? Somebody snapped during mealtime? Was the chair thrown in anger? Why would halfway through a meal you decide to go and unbox a crate? Why would you be even looking outside?
Was it just one meal?
I'm not sure. I've just got the remains of a half-eaten meal written down.
So I'm presuming that's singular. So that could have been MacArthur.
Yeah, it could have been, because he went out afterwards.
Yeah.
So he might have been eating while the other two were working, and then he's gone, oh, where are they? But then why would he overturn the chair?
Yeah, that kind of makes sense, actually. Initially, the whole madness/murder thing, that was like, nah, not interested. But it's starting to make more sense in my head, actually.
Yeah, it's what I lean to. So I reckon that this guy snapped, and either he's had an argument at the table with one of the other guys, or both of them, and pushed the chair over or something like that, or he's just snapped on his own and pushed the chair over in anger, and then he's gone out and killed the two, and then killed himself, and then the damage to the western landing area is from the days after when there was a storm. That's my assumption anyway.
Very cool.
I haven't got any argument to that. It sounds like the most credible
Yeah,
to me.
and the writing in the logbook as well is him hallucinating, perhaps, or maybe over-exaggerating a small storm.
What do you think as a cover-up?
No, just because he's going crazy. I don't think there's any point to cover it up because he killed himself.
Or maybe the storm isn't a storm.
What are you getting at?
I don't know. I was just building suspense for a second. No, I was gonna half joke, but what if he was talking about an argument? Nah.
What, he was like describing an argument as a storm in like a poetic way?
Yeah, no, it doesn't make any sense.
Although,
God is overall.
In terms, I'm just about to read the diary out where you've just said that from. So December the 12th, Ducat irritable. 12 p.m, Ducat quiet, maybe dead. December 13th, Ducat quiet. And then he says me, Ducat, and MacArthur prayed on the 13th. But again, Ducat quiet.
Oh, what if he's just staring at his dead body for days? Oh, that's creepy as hell. I don't like this guy. Put my foot down. I don't like him. He's shifty. Maybe he's a ghost.
Maybe he's the spirit. Maybe
why
he's
would he say they all prayed, or is it because he literally prayed next to the
He
bodies?
prayed next to the bodies, but he thought they were still alive, so he put their hands together in a praying motion.
Wait, hang on. You said Ducat and MacArthur.
Yeah.
So it was Marshall that recorded.
Yes.
But MacArthur was the one we're presuming killed. It's written in the diary as if Marshall had written it, correct? Because he references Ducat and MacArthur.
Yes. Yeah.
The guy who left his oilskin and then walked out, you said that was MacArthur.
Yeah.
So we were presuming that MacArthur was the killer, not Marshall.
Okay.
So did Marshall then not forge, but did MacArthur write it as if Marshall was writing?
Maybe.
Or was he talking about himself? But he references, he never references Marshall, does he? So it must have, in theory, if they were all sane, it must have been Marshall talking. So maybe Marshall did it. Maybe MacArthur was the one who was running.
Or he lured them outside with a bird call.
What if Marshall killed Ducat and then MacArthur saw what was happening, ran out to try and help?
Oh yeah, here we go.
Yeah. Because you know what I mean? I was going along this entire time thinking MacArthur was the one who wrote it, but then it references MacArthur.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so MacArthur is the one that was supposed to have been staying behind in the lighthouse, and Marshall and Ducat were the ones that were supposedly going to save their equipment as well.
So apart from the oilskin getting left behind that had presumably MacArthur's name on it, or it was in his...
Yeah. It was on his peg. Whether or not it had his name on it, I'm not sure.
So what if they genuinely didn't stick to pegs? It could have been anyone.
We're stumped. No, I definitely think it's some sort of murder sort of thing. Gotta be, right? I mean, that guy sounds insane in the writing.
But that was Marshall, in theory.
Yeah, what if he
not
killed
much
them?
after it.
Like you said, what if he was killing the guy
yeah.
outside and then the one sat inside eating saw it, heard the shouting,
Yeah.
ran outside to help?
It's boring, and again, it doesn't explain the damage, but it kind of explains the damage that there was a storm after. So yeah,
I wouldn't say it's boring, I'd say it's the most exciting. Besides a literal ghost.
yeah. There you go. That's what I mean. Like, apart from like supernatural, it's I don't know. It's definitely the most realistic from what we talked about.
Yeah, it covers the most
Yeah.
happenings in the
It covers
story.
the most ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
literally.
no, I'm going to dispute
Oh
it
my
again.
God.
I just the
Why are
rail
you
track,
like this?
screw you. This is why we do this the podcast. The railroad. I can't see a rail track. Right, railroads do get damaged by storms.
Yes.
To what extent?
Very much so.
By things falling on them.
Like
Or
1 ton
getting
rocks?
literally uprooted.
By like landslides and things that are created by weather effects. If you think about it, a rail is 2 metal tracks based on a foundation. If the foundation slips in any way, the track gets damaged.
Do you know where the rail track was damaged? And to what extent?
Well, I mean, it sounds like there was some sort of landslide by the rail track because there was a 1 ton boulder, right?
Yes, so I don't know exactly where, but yeah, Alex is right. Iron railings spanning the track were bent, and the iron railway was wrenched out of the concrete with a rock weighing more than a ton being displaced as well. So, like, the idea that a landslide of some kind or some sort of weather-related effect damaged the railway, I don't think is a stretch in any way.
Yeah, and it could just be completely unrelated to the fact that the people have gone missing because it could have happened days afterwards.
Well, the other thing that I'm wondering is, could it have been there for ages?
I mean, is there any mention beforehand of their being damaged to the landing?
Surely they would have noticed. Like,
No.
It seems like something they would have noted down. Like
Robert Weirhead literally went there the week before or whatever. And I'm sure he would have noticed damage to his lighthouse area.
Yeah, it seems like something they'd want to fix quite quickly.
Yeah, definitely. How are they going to get supplies up? Like you said, the rail track was used to help carry supplies. And presuming that when the superintendent visited, he would have potentially brought supplies.
Yeah, he sat in the rail car and they pushed him upwards to the lighthouse. That's how he always travels.
I can't tell if you're taking the piss on
I'm taking the piss.
I was like, did I miss something at the start? I don't know. I can't tell with his tone of voice. No, okay. I don't know. I think it's the most realistic suggestion in theory, but something still doesn't sit right with me.
You got any idea, Stuart?
I think the main thing for me is that the idea of a murder fits very neatly into a lot of features of it. So it explains the potential panic in terms of the beds being unmade, the meal being disrupted. It doesn't really explain why the door would have been carefully shut behind, because you think if there was a murder taking place outside and somebody was running out mid, that they wouldn't have shut the door casually behind them. They'd have been booking it out there to save the guy's life. Unless, of course, the fact that we keep going on and on and on about it, but these guys were experienced. They probably literally had pattern recognition, ridiculous protocoling. You go out and you lock the door behind you because then the lighthouse doesn't get damaged inside, or wind doesn't get damaged inside, or it doesn't destroy the stores and things.
Mm.
They might have literally just gone completely into autopilot, absolutely booked it out of there, but still just by sheer driven
Muscle memory.
Muscle memory, yeah, shut the door behind them. And then I think the storm does obviously explain the other bits as well in terms of the damage to the island and things like that. The thing that I find strange about the sea as a theory is the lack of evidence that the lighthouse itself has been damaged.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Like, you'd expect if there was a really bad storm that the lighthouse would have been damaged in some way.
I mean, it's pretty far from the coast, though.
But it's not that far from the north coast. When you look at the pictures, it's not that far.
Yeah, I
It
guess
does
so.
make sense that it's quite far from the geo.
Yeah, agreed. But you'd still think there would be some, if there were a storm that was that severe to cause really rip-roaring winds, you'd expect the highest point of the island, which is where you'd put a lighthouse on, would show other signs of damage. But I suppose you might never be able to determine that that's due to one storm. Literally, there's going to be hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years of weathering to that peak.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you going to know if it's one storm on the 20th of December versus one storm on the 14th of December or on the 17th? I'm just not sure how you can say that.
And I think the lighthouse would be designed in such a way to resist storms more than the landing area, because the lighthouse needs to be there for a longer period, right?
Yeah.
But the chapel, though, as well.
The chapel was built very well, though.
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah, they built things very, very good in the 7th century. That was the height of engineering.
What about the helicopter pad?
The ancient 7th century helicopter pad is so good that it's still there today.
Okay.
It was H for...
Aliens.
Hither. Come hither. Yeah, maybe it was a UFO landing pad. There we go. Solved.
Yeah. All right, should we wrap it up?
Yeah, it's a mystery.
It is a mystery, but I think it's one that we have a fairly even conclusion on.
Yeah, crazy people be crazy. They like killing people. And storms like to destroy railway tracks.
Literally, damn nature, you scary.
Damn nature, you scary.
I'm undecided. Because the murder thing, or madness, whichever way you look at it, the human side of it can be explained with different theories. But it doesn't... The damage and the storm, none of that makes sense. Nothing adds up.
I guess we'll never know.
So I do think it was Alex and being the spirit of the island.
It was me all along.
Lord Spiritus.
I was both a spirit and I spilt the spirit on the floor.
The what? Oh.
He spilt the
The
whiskey.
whiskey. It was all part of my grand plan to kill off lots of lighthouse keepers over a 5-year period. I had a quota to fill.
For no reason.
So when we visiting, it's got to be dead easy to socially distance over there.
In a lighthouse?
Yeah? No. Well, okay.
Ramblings of a Madman is currently available on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, and YouTube. All the links are available on Twitter at Roam Podcast, that's ROAM Podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye!